Hello, everyone. I'm Noni Wygand. I'm the Content and Social Media Marketing Manager here at RangeMe, and I'm honored to be joined by Alli Ball. Alli is the founder and CEO of Food Biz Wiz. She is actually a former grocery buyer turned wholesale consultant, and she helps brands understand how to land on the retail shelf. So today we'll be taking a deeper dive at her most recent blog post, 5 reasons why a buyer says no to your product and how you can change it to a yes. So Alli, without further ado, welcome and thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Noni. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. So with that introduction, I'm going to dive into my first question. So Alli, in your article, you do say that when brands hear a no from a buyer or say they get ghosted and don't get a response, it's because of one primary reason. So what is that underlying reason as to why brands usually get a no?
Yeah, good question. And I hear this all the time. Brands are like, I can't get a buyer to call me back, even when they do finally say they want my product line. Like they never place that first order. Like, what is going on? Like, what is up with these no's? And Noni, it all comes back to this underlying reason that the buyer doesn't trust you. They don't trust that you are going to help them meet their category goals. So whether that is higher sales or higher margin, it all comes back to the fact that that buyer, when you get a no or when you get ghosted, it's because they don't trust you.
Well, speaking of, gaining trust and basically strategy. So when you're first gaining traction in the industry, and maybe you don't have sales data behind your brand to show this trust, like how do you show the buyer that you will be a top seller?
Yeah, that's a good question because we see this a lot, right? That brands like when you're just getting going, you don't have sales data. You don't have brag-worthy stats that you can share in your sales pitches. So what do? It's pretty simple. You basically do a deep dive, like Google search for categories, stats, and category data. So maybe you don't have sales traction that you can show, but you can tell that buyer how your category is trending. So Noni, let's say you make like a ready to drink coffee with adaptogens in them. You're going to do that Google deep dive and figure out how adaptogen use is up and pull a stat from there. And there's so much free information online, so much free data online. It's just a Google search away. So category data can really be your friend here.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. And I know buyers are looking for the next what's trending thing. So if you can somehow reflect your brand into that, I think that's a really, really good way to do that.
Totally. It could
And
even be like ingredient data. It could be a target audience that's spending more money on your type of product. It could be, you could be solving a problem, like a health problem that people is on the rise, or maybe you're combating stress or anxiety. We saw a lot of that through functional food during COVID. So basically like any sort of data that you can use to provide that thesis statement on how your product is going to sell.
great, I love that. And that's basically a good tactic to get a buyer's attention and gain their trust. But I kind of want to know the other side. What mistakes do you see most brands make when they pitch to a buyer, and what should they do instead?
Yeah, Noni, I have seen so many bad pitches in my day. When I was a buyer, we would have, I would probably have dozens of little samples with my name on them and like a little brown bag left for me week in and week out. And so I've got a whole bunch of things on what not to do here, but maybe I'll just highlight 3 because we could do a whole other blog post on this. So the first one is forgetting why buyers bring in new products in the first place. Right? So buyers bring in new products to enhance sales or margin in a particular category. That's like 95% of the reason why they're bringing in new product lines. Your product has to sell on the shelf. So one of the mistakes I see brands make is they use these subjective attributes to sell their product instead of convincing that buyer that their product is going to sell on the shelf. So maybe that's saying, my product is really delicious. My candles have the most appealing scents. My packaging's really cute. Like any of those things are subjective attributes about your brand. And we, again, want to use those hard stats to attract a buyer instead. So stop saying your product's delicious. That's my number one.
Yeah.
Number two is not having a system for following up after you do that initial sales pitch. So Noni, I've got this wild stat. HubSpot, one of my favorite CRMs,
Oh, yeah.
says that 44% of sales reps give up after the very first sales interaction, but 80% of the time you get a yes, or 80% of yeses happen on the 5th try. So if 44% of you guys are stopping after attempt number 1, but 80% of the time the yeses happen on event number 5, we really need that system for following up and following up and following up with that buyer. So that's mistake number 2, not having a system for follow-up.
Oh,
And
yes.
mistake number 3 is not showing the buyer that you're going to support your product once it's actually on the shelf. And I see so often that founders and sales rep miss this in their sales pitch. And so that, again, it goes back to trust. That buyer has no trust that you are going to support your sales and that you're going to be that equal partnership in your sales success once you actually do land on the shelf.
Great. Yeah, I know getting a no or not getting a response might be hard, but I think following through on that and then also following through on your promise to put your effort behind your brand is really important. And, speaking of that, if a brand ultimately does get a no from a buyer, should that just be the end of it? Is that all they can do, or should they continue to follow up?
Yeah, it's hard because no's can feel like a personal rejection, right? Especially when you've put so much time and effort and, frankly, a lot of money into your product line. When you get a no, it's easy to take it personally. So, Noni, the short answer is no, there's absolutely more chances for you, even with that same buyer. So even when we get a no, I like to basically go back to the table and understand why that buyer doesn't have trust in your brand, and craft a rebuttal that essentially convinces them they're wrong, and here's how you can trust me. Give them a reason to, or give them an offer that's appealing to make it less risky for the buyer to bring in your product line. So maybe they say, no, you've got too short of a shelf life. You can have a rebuttal that says, okay, well, I'll do 60 days of guaranteed sales, right? So something that makes it more appealing for that buyer to say yes. And then again, Noni, a big reminder that we see so much change in our industry, so much turnover in buyer positions, buyers moving to different positions or moving to different companies altogether. So even if you've gotten a no in the past, you can reach out a couple months later and you might likely be talking to a completely different person. So yeah, I'm all about following up again and again and again until you get a very stern, like, no, stop calling, stop sending examples. It is a no, and it will always be a no. But until you get that full permission to try again.
Definitely. So to conclude, it's the best route is to make the buyer's life a lot easier. They are busy, to build that trust and to also show dedication in your brand and your product. So I think that's what I would take away from this conversation.
Yeah, you got it. That's exactly it, Noni.
Perfect. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. And if you're curious to learn all the nitty-gritty details about Alli's strategy and her recommendations, check out her blog on rangeme.com/blog. And thanks.